Okay, real quick, before anything else, Europe is not a continent. I don't mean that as some internet hot take. I mean geologically, technically, by every rule we use to define a continent, it kind of isn't one. It doesn't sit on its own tectonic plate. It's not surrounded by water. It fails the checklist. And yet, it's sitting right there on every classroom map next to Asia, Africa, and the rest. Like it totally earned its spot. So here's the actual jaw dropper. The line separating Europe from Asia was, at different points in history, drawn through a river that isn't even the river people meant, moved by a Swedish mapmaker with basically zero geological training, and eventually left sitting on a mountain range purely because nobody could agree on anything better. By the end of this video, you're going to know the actual origin story behind one of the biggest fake facts hiding in plain sight on every map in the world. And once you see it, you will never look at a globe the same way again. Alright, so let's go back, way back, like 6th century BC back. There's this Greek guy named Anaximander, try saying that 5 times fast, and around 550 BC, he draws up one of the earliest known maps of the known world. Now, nobody has the original map. It didn't survive. We only know about it through later writers describing it, so keep that in mind. But basically, Anaximander pictures the Earth as a flat disk floating in a huge ocean, and he splits the land in the middle into pieces. Later Greek thinkers, including the historian Herodotus in the 400s BC, run with a version of this and describe the world as 3 chunks: Europe, Asia, and Libya, which is roughly what we'd now call parts of Africa, all separated by the Mediterranean Sea and wrapped by a giant river called Oceanus that they believed circled the whole Earth. Here's the thing that always gets me though. The boundary between Europe and Asia specifically got tied to 2 rivers, the Nile and a river called the Phasis, which is now known as the Rioni River in modern-day Georgia. So this massive, permanent-feeling division between 2 continents was, at least partly, decided by rivers that a handful of guys in togas had heard about secondhand, with no satellites, no surveys, nothing. It was convenience. It was, this is about as far as we've explored, let's just call it here. And quick fun wrinkle, Herodotus himself, the guy credited with a lot of this, actually pushed back on rigid divisions like this in his own writing. He questioned strict boundary lines and leaned toward describing the world by how people and geography actually connected, rather than clean-cut borders. So even one of the founders of the continent idea wasn't fully sold on it. That's worth sitting on for a second. Quick gut check before we keep going. Drop a comment right now. Growing up, did you ever actually question why Europe and Asia are separate continents? Or did you just accept it because it's what the map said? I want to see how many of us just took this one on faith. So the Greeks plant the idea, and the Romans basically just keep using it. They inherit the 3-continent model. They don't really challenge it. They've got an empire to run. They're not exactly auditing ancient cartography for accuracy. Fast forward through the Middle Ages, and Europe just kind of absorbs this as cultural identity. We are Europeans, separate from Asia. Even though, again, nobody's drawn an actual precise, agreed-upon line yet. It's more of a vibe than a border for over 1,000 years. Then, in the 1720s, we get the guy who actually nails down something close to what we still use today. Philip Johann von Strahlenberg, a Swedish military officer and geographer who spent over a decade as a prisoner of war in Russia after the Battle of Poltava, and used that time to study Russian geography obsessively. In 1725, later published in a major work around 1730, Strahlenberg proposed that the real border between Europe and Asia should follow the Ural Mountains, then the Emba River down to the Caspian Sea, then cross through a lowland area called the Kumamanich Depression, ending near the Sea of Azov. That's a genuinely huge shift, moving the boundary from some rivers near Georgia all the way north to a mountain range in Russia. Why the Urals specifically? Well, geologically, they're legit. This mountain range formed around 250 million years ago during something geologists call the Hercynian orogeny, when tectonic plates collided and crumpled the land upward. It's a real, physical, ancient feature. It just wasn't picked because it's a perfect natural continental split. It got picked because a Swedish XPO thought it made a clean line on a map, and it stuck.
And it kept shifting after that too.
Today, most geographers use the Ural Mountains and the Ural River as the border in the north, then the watershed of the Caucasus Mountains further south, then the Bosporus and Dardanelles Straits near Turkey, splitting off into the Black Sea and the Aegean. But, and this is the part that breaks people's brains a little, there are at least half a dozen competing versions of this exact line, still used by different countries and institutions, some running along the northern base of the Caucasus, some along the southern base, some following totally different rivers. There is no single, universally agreed line. There never really has been. So here's the actual answer to why are Europe and Asia two continents? It's not geology. Europe and Asia sit on largely the same landmass and are generally treated as part of the same broader Eurasian tectonic region. There's no ocean, no true plate boundary running cleanly between them the way there is between, say, Africa and South America. The division is historical and cultural, going straight back to those early Greek geographers who split the known world into pieces based on what little they'd explored, and later formalized by European mapmakers who had a pretty obvious motivation to make sure their home turf got its own continent label instead of just being the western edge of Asia. And once you know that, you start noticing it everywhere. Geography textbooks, world maps, even the 7-continent model taught in most Western schools, versus places like Russia and parts of Europe that sometimes teach a 6-continent model, lumping Europe and Asia together as Eurasia. Same planet, same landmass, different stories depending on which classroom you sat in. Remember how we opened this thing? Europe technically fails the checklist for being its own continent. Here's the twist. That's not a flaw in geography. That's a feature of how humans define categories. We drew a hard line between continent and not a continent, the same way, for a long time, we drew a hard line between the thing that uses electricity and the thing that makes electricity. Buildings just consumed power. Cars just consumed power. Full stop, end of story, for over a century. Except that line is dissolving right now, in real time. Electric vehicles and smart buildings are quietly starting to feed power back into the grid instead of just pulling from it, blurring a boundary everyone treated as permanent. Sound familiar? A line we all assumed was fixed and natural turns out to be a lot more flexible than we thought, whether it's drawn across a mountain range in Russia or through the wiring in your garage. So next time someone tells you a fact is just how the world works, a continent, a category, a rule everybody follows, maybe ask who actually drew that line and why, because half the time, the answer is way weirder than you'd expect. If this cracked open something you thought was locked down for good, you're going to want to see the next one, because continents aren't the only settled fact that's actually just a really old guess nobody bothered to fix.